This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW, flyers, that is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 373, entitled Seeking the Masculist Wilberforce. Description. This flyer hopes to inspire some future masculist political legal genius, some 21st century Wilberforce, to devote his life to the legislation of the paternity rejection right, which will be historically equivalent to the fight of the suffragettes for the vote for women in the early 20th century. Wilberforce fought for decades to abolish the moral abomination of negro slavery in the British Empire, and finally succeeded. This 21st century masculist Wilberforce will have to fight women's evolved instinct to trick men into getting them pregnant, then forcing men to pay for kids they do not want, thus manslaving him for decades. It will be a passionate fight as women dig in their heels to preserve their evolved desires to sexploit men, to pay for them to have babies, and as men express their hatred at women for manslaving them for decades. It will be a bitter fight, requiring a masculist champion, a masculist liberator, a masculist Wilberforce. The flyer itself. Seeking the Masculist Wilberforce by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. An analogy has been brewing in my head for a few weeks now, namely the close historical analogy I see between the British parliamentarian William Wilberforce and his decades-long fight for the abolition of slavery in the British Empire, and the future historical equivalent of the masculist abolition of manslavery, which won't just put whites against blacks, but will create a battle royal between the sexes, which I see as the equivalent of the suffragettes' fight for the vote, which became the crystallized goal of the fight for women's emancipation in the early decades of the 20th century. The idea that is crystallizing in my mind is that the masculist fight for the paternity rejection right is going to be the 21st century's equivalent of the feminists' fight for the vote in the 20th century, with the exception of New Zealand, which gave women the vote in 1893, the first country in the world to do so. If this proves to be true, then the achievement of the legislation of the will need its Wilberforce, its masculist champion, who devotes his life to achieving this magnificent goal that will profoundly change society, causing major disruptions in the social order in the ways that men, and particularly women, have led their daily lives. At the present time, 2020, I feel that society is barely conscious of just how immense a fight the legislation of the will prove to be. It will be opposed vociferously by women, since having children is their primary raison d'etre. Women have evolved amoral attitudes towards getting pregnant, not caring if the men they trick into giving women their sperm are severely implicated by that pregnancy. For example, in about 5% of pregnancies, a husband is not the father. This gender crime, committed routinely by women, is known as paternity fraud. The MGTOWs, that's men going their own way, an important branch of the men's lib movement, talk about, in quotes, alpha fucks and beta bucks. That is, the aim of women to fuck alpha males, that is, males who have superior genes to these women, so that women can satisfy their hypergamous instinct, that is, the desire to mate with a superior male, to get his superior DNA for her kids, so that her kids have DNA that is superior to hers. which is good for the species, so was selected for, so evolved. All women are hypergamous, and hypergamy is often amoral, or from the masculist point of view, criminally immoral. A beta buck's male is not an alpha, so is sexually less attractive to a female, but is often the male that a female will settle down with, relying on his bucks to support her kids. Millions of women will jump at the chance to have sex with a real alpha. Look at the rock band groupie phenomenon. Young fertile women throng around male rock stars, hoping to get some of his sperm for their kids, so that their kids can have characteristics that made their father a rock star, that is, glamorous, rich, famous, powerful. Such things are real aphrodisiacs to women. Billy Graham, the US evangelist, had a rule that he was never to be alone with a stranger woman in a room, through fear that the woman would jump his bones to get herself pregnant with Graham's sperm, his super sperm. Often women will get themselves pregnant with the sperm of a man they consider to be an alpha, or at least way above their own SMV, that's sexual marketplace value, and hence seen as being highly desirable by her, and then have that child raised by another man, a beta, who earns the bucks for the upkeep of that child. To many women, this is normal, as they say, in quotes, "All is fair in love and war." They care less about the immorality of what they are doing and care more about getting pregnant with the sperm of an alpha, because at the end of the day, life and survival is all about reproduction. The woman will feel instinctively that she has done a marvellous thing if she produces a wonder child from an alpha male. Women are all about growing and raising children. That is what they evolved to do. It's what their DNA is geared to do. That drives women to find a good man, that is, with as high an SMV as she can attract, and more importantly, can keep, and to mate with him. The MGTOWs also talk a lot about the monkey branching of women, which is the label given to the phenomenon of women always being on the lookout for a superior man to mate with. She keeps her current man because he is paying the bills. She continues to extract resources from him, but if a realistic opportunity arises to switch, to monkey branch, to a superior man, she will. That is, she holds onto her current branch/man while reaching out for the next branch/man, hoping to pair off with a superior man who can offer her more resources. This monkey branching behaviour of women makes perfect Darwinian sense. In primitive times, in times of starvation, a woman who evolved to be a monkey brancher was more likely to survive, and so too her kids. So if she held on to an inferior man, a less profligate provider, and her tribe was starving, then that lack of monkey branching may have cost her her life. Her female friend who did monkey branch may have survived with higher probability. The MGTOWs also talk about the red pill nature of women. That is, that women do not love men unconditionally, but love men's sexploitability. If a woman becomes convinced that she will be unable to extract resources from a given man, then she will utterly lose interest in that man and prefer a more sexploitable man. Women evolved to be prostitutes to men, so as to be better able to sexploit men, to be better able to extract resources from men. Those women who had more days in the month in sexual heat had more chance of attracting men's attention and men's willingness to exchange men's hard-won, male-hunted meat for access to a woman's vagina. The human female is the sexiest of mammals. She is in sexual heat all days of the month. Women evolved this way because they were stuck at home looking after helpless infants while their men were chasing around the bush for days on end, hunting game to bring back meat for themselves, their women and their children. Thus women have the mentality of prostitutes that evolved in them. They use their female sexuality to attract men's attention so that women can, further down the road in the relationship, rely on a man and his resources to pay for her to have kids so that she can concentrate on raising them without being forced to forage for most of the time for food. By carrying their small children on their backs, they can forage for nearby food fairly readily, but they can't hunt, running for miles the way men can. Women have always been parasites of men. They evolved that way over millions of years. I hope the above serves as an introduction, a prelude, as to why it is highly likely that when the masculists really push hard for the legislation of the para, that women will react with visceral, unconscious, evolved gut reactions and will fight the para with tooth and nail, with all the passion they have, because for them, not having the para will feel like a threat to their very survival. For the masculists, however, the para is equivalent to being freed from manslavery, from decades-long bondage to the supremely selfish desires of women to have kids and to have men pay for those kids. Women don't care too much about the level of morality, or rather the level of immorality, when it comes to getting pregnant and by which man, so long as the man is superior to her and will stick around. The para to the masculists is like the vote for the feminists. It is the linchpin of the masculist movement, the primary political goal of the masculists, and the means to obtain the freedom of men from the parasitic manslavery of women. Women evolved to be manslavers, to be amoral regarding getting pregnant, so their instincts will oppose the masculist push for the para. The problem for women is that the fight for the para makes real masculist sense in the light of modern technology. It was men who invented the contraceptive pill, so women can now reliably control the number of kids they want, and they want 0, 1 or 2 usually, so have a career window of some half a century. Even those women who have their 2 kids, that is needed if a population is not to wipe itself out by not having a birth rate at least of 2.1 children per woman. The masculists put enormous moral pressure on women to FIP up, that is to become FIPs, in brackets FIP, that's FIP, equals financially independent person, and have the financial power to force women to FIP up, since nearly all men are FIPs, since men are socialized to be FIPs, and even evolved to be FIPs, since men don't get pregnant. A fluffy, that is, a masculinist label for a traditional woman who expects to be able to parasite off the money and labour of a man, can only be a fluffy if she can get her financial claws into some gullible manslave. Thanks to the rise and rise of the masculists and MGTOWs, the supply of such gullible manslavable men is drying up, as the masculist and MGTOW movements via the internet teach young men not to marry and not to have kids, while the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites still control the divorce courts, expecting women to have equal rights in the parliaments, but to continue to have the right to behave as fluffy parasites in the divorce courts, treating men as cash machines to be robbed and abused, destroying the lives of one father in 4. Half of marriages end in divorce, and about half of these divorces the ex-wife turns into a vindictive feminazi bitch who is out to get everything he has. That is what the Americans call being taken to the cleaners. This kind of fluffy feminist hypocrisy is truly hated by the masculists, who are out to literally destroy such women by totally ignoring them, not even pumping and dumping them, forcing them to rot on the shelf, manless, hence loveless, sexless, babyless, and as the masculist movement spreads, spat at, treated as vermin to be wiped out, literally, by having their feminazi bitch genes removed from the gene pool. This is the end of part 1.